Welcome to another episode of Dr. MC's Self-Care Cabaret podcast. I'm Teresa Melito-Conners, a PhD-level self-care expert in the greater Boston area with a passion for helping others recognize the importance of caring for themselves. Today's guest is a member of my family, my cousin, Allison Dorico. Allison is an Ayurvedic health counselor, a yoga and meditation teacher, in addition to being a wife and dog mom extraordinaire. The story goes that when my mom and dad went to the hospital and held Allison shortly after she made her appearance into the world, my mom thought to herself, wow, I want one. Well, I was born about 9 months later, almost to the day. I will let you connect the dots of what happened when my parents left the hospital that sunny June day. But as a result, I have an older cousin whom I am very close to and have shared many adventures with. I admire Allison's free spirit and openness to the universe. I remember when Allison was going to become a yoga teacher. It was not as trendy then, and I was not as familiar with it and its benefits. But we have both been interested in self-care and non-traditional healing methods for quite some time. Allison has been an entrepreneur for years, and she was one of the first people I told when I was launching Dr. MC's Self-Care Cabaret. I have to say, for those who have taken a workshop with me since COVID, you have likely heard me raving about my cousin and her private yoga classes that she has been hosting for my mother and I. Well, this is that cousin, and I'm so excited to have her here with us today. Allison teaches group and private yoga classes and offers Ayurvedic health consults too. I am delighted to share our conversation with you. All right, let's get started. So first question, tell me a little bit about how you became a yoga and meditation teacher and an Ayurvedic health counselor, because it's fascinating.
All right. So I'll start with yoga teaching because that came first. I had been practicing yoga probably for about 5 years at a studio just outside Boston. It no longer exists, but it was prana power yoga. It was a hot vinyasa style yoga. And so when the teacher training came around, I kind of felt like it was something I always was curious about. So in 2012, I did my 200-hour training at Prana. That was in Cambridge. And then from there, I kind of dove right in and just started teaching classes. And for why I was practicing yoga, I guess to get into that a little bit more, it was something that always felt like it stuck with me. Like there'd be periods where I wasn't practicing a lot, but then I always was lured back in because I just felt so great after the practice. I just felt it was a sense of, I was after college where I would say in college, I wasn't very connected to my body or any kind of spiritual sense. Health wasn't a real big factor of college. So after
it's
all
not
that,
for most college students, unfortunately. Maybe we can shift that a little.
Yeah, it was the opposite, just a lot of drinking and, not really being too mindful.
Feeling invincible.
Yeah, exactly. So the feeling of after the yoga practice was just it was new and it was exciting and I just always felt great and I just wanted to bring that out, expand and help more people experience yoga. Yeah, so that was in 2012. So 9 years ago. I've been teaching since then. And, with a little bit, this year was a little different, having to learn new skills and how to teach online. But for the most part, teaching group classes. Over the last couple of years, I started diving more into one-on-one private classes, working with people. And then it was about 6 years ago. So I'd say halfway through my teaching, I heard about Ayurveda. Another teacher was studying it and doing some workshops, and I was very much intrigued. It was called yoga's sister science. So I was like, how do I not know about this? There's a sister to yoga. And so with Ayurveda, for those who aren't familiar with the term, it focuses a lot on how you're taking care of yourself daily. So beyond the asana movement posture practice of yoga, we're looking at your lifestyle and, all how you find meaning in your life, how you take care of yourself. Just, it's like another level. So it was 2015, I think. I don't know the exact dates, but I don't know that matters.
Not necessarily. We'll go with 5 or 6 years ago.
Yeah, 5 or 6 years ago, I enrolled in the Ayurvedic program at Kripalu, which was 650 hours. Like a regular yoga teacher training is 200 hours at the baseline, and then you can do another 300 to get your 500 hours. So this was intense. It's 650 hours on site at Kripalu. So I was going out there for like 9-day stint. So you're like completely immersed. And a lot is learning different lifestyle, different diet techniques, and really understanding yourself. So there's a sense of we're all unique. We're all made up differently. So what works for one person to make them feel their optimal self is not necessarily going to work for someone else. So that's a little bit on that. I don't know if you want me to elaborate anywhere.
Yeah, so I'm going to have you elaborate a little bit more in Ayurveda. So, because I do talk about it in some of my trainings, I started getting into Ayurveda back in like 2011-ish, when kind of around the time when I first realized that I needed to start taking care of myself in the job I was in, or I wasn't going to be able to sustain it. That was back when I was working at a therapeutic high school as the guidance director and working with students significantly impacted with social emotional issues, trauma, eating disorders, all sorts of challenges. And I needed to figure out how to take care of myself in order to take care of my students and be there for them. So I stumbled upon kind of Ayurveda at that point, which is funny that our paths were kind of going along at the same time, but not necessarily aware that each of us were studying these things. And, started studying first, like Deepak Chopra's work, and really got into it, and then did some more local stuff with some other experts closer to home. And but really, Ayurveda's general principle is to strive to connect the mind, body, and the spirit, which is very different than how we view healing and medicine in this country. And it's actually, and you may know more about this, but wasn't it developed in India like 5,000 years ago? And It's really the world's oldest healing system, and it's very different than how we heal the body in this country from a very different perspective. You want to elaborate a little more on that?
Yes, I will. So yes, you're right. It's approximately 5,000 years old. It's in the same timeline as yoga. So they do go together. One thing I like to clarify is within the Ayurveda umbrella, Ayurveda sees yoga as like a therapy or a treatment. So like you would suggest to someone like, oh, this would be a great yoga practice for you based on your lifestyle and your constitution and this. So that's something that I like to point out because they all kind of fall in together. And as far as your question about, how Ayurveda is really looking like a lot of holistic systems, like we're trying to find the root, like what is causing the imbalance. And I'll get a little technical on, it looks at the body, like we're looking at the whole picture here. We're looking at like your physicality, your mental state, your everything that makes you you. Like what are your spiritual practices and taking all that into account, because just because maybe there's something going on in your stomach, it might not necessarily only be the stomach having the issue. It could be an emotional thing that is affecting your stomach, so it's taking really small baby steps to kind of figure out what all is going on and what could be causing the imbalance. So I wanted to talk about the doshas. So Ayurveda looks at everything based in a 5-element theory. So everything is made up of 5 elements. So if you're talking about anything, a table, there's earth, air, ether, water, and fire. Okay. So everything is made up of these 5 elements, but in different ratios. So if you're talking about a table, there would be a lot more of an earth element because it is a solid piece Whereas when you're looking at a human body, you know, again, we are all part of this big world. So we are also made up of these 5 elements in different ratios. So some people are more watery, some people are more grounded and earthy, some people are more airy. So looking at a person in that sense and trying to figure out how to balance it. So like equals like. So if someone was extra airy and kind of flitting all over the place, adding more movement to their life, more activities that are kind of jumping from one thing to the next is going to just keep adding on to that. And there's no sense of being grounded and steady. So with those 5 elements, they break then down into what Ayurveda calls doshas. So there's 3 major doshas, Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. And Vata dosha is air and ether. So it's the lightest, it's the king, it's the easiest one to get out of balance. Pitta is fire and water. So we're looking at like these more fiery elements. And then Kapha is earth and water. So you think about more like dense, solid foundation with Kapha. So again, the whole body, we're all made up of these 3 doshas, just in different ratios. So just looking at how that comes into play with how a person is functioning. So if you have, again, to use the same example, if you have more Vata, if you have more air and ether, like something that's going to help balance you out is adding more grounding and steadying activities, more grounding and steadying foods to help balance things out. So we're always looking to find this sense of equilibrium and balance within the body. And it's complex, like trying to figure that out. So step 1, which I'm sure, you know, when you were studying and looked into it, is kind of figuring out, and there's assessments you can take online, like where you land on the dosha scale. Like everyone has kind of a dominant dosha, and then there's like a secondary one. And that can help just gain some insight into, you know, what practices, what nutrition might be best for you.
Yeah, I love that. And that was definitely a place I started back many years ago and have reassessed as time has gone on, because I feel like when you're out of balance, your doshas shift a little bit. And I'm just curious what I think I know, but I'm going to ask you, what is your dosha?
So I know I'm mostly Pitta. I'm the middle. It's a fiery dosha. I mean, a sneaky way to figure out Pittas. A lot of Pittas are redheads. We have the tendency to sunburn. A little more fiery and feisty in your personality. So it's all. If you're gonna look at it like from a physical standpoint, it's like a medium kind of average build. Pittas tend to have strong appetites, very much like to be challenged and learning. So it was very, you know, my Ayurveda training, I would say 80% was Pitta. Like we're all just kind of like intensely like writing our notes. And so there's pros and cons to both. Like it's great. Like there's a little bit of an intensity, there's a feistiness, there's, you know, but then like the flip, if it's out of whack, you know, it can lead to more like thinking of like hot emotions. It can lead to like irritability. Pitta is more prone to like rashes and skin irritations and things of that nature. Like spicy foods, like when I was doing my initial intake with a practitioner, I couldn't figure out, I was having some digestive issues. And I was like, what's up? And I'm, you know, she's like, your dosha's Pitta, you're teaching hot yoga. And at that point in time, like pepperoni pizza and like hot wings were like my go-to lunch. So like,
Yummy.
yeah. So now it's like, I look back and I was like, oh, that's why I was like, just overheating and like having some issues in the gut. So it's stuff, I think, when you think about it, like logically, like it's like, oh, like that makes sense. I mean, that was what it was for me. Like I was like, oh, like this lands well. This I get it. Like, anyway.
Yeah, no, I love it. I totally agree. I tend to be actually Pitta Kapha. Those are the two that I kind of, depending upon, those are the two that come up the most when I do it. And at different times, when I'm in balance and not, it can sway kind of in either direction. But that's generally, I didn't know that about redheads though, that redheads are typically pitta, which is just really funny. And I love the idea that, we get to the root of the issue. Like, what is causing the dis-ease? We're quick to, treat symptoms. That's typically how we think of things. Like, we want to go to the doctor. We want, just give me what I can take to fix it and keep it moving. Then we're not necessarily interested in doing the work to figure out what is really at the root. And that's really a more Ayurvedic perspective. And I love that. I think it's excellent. And I definitely have adopted some of these practices into my life. One of the first ones, and Allison, you probably do this too, but having developed a dinacharya, which is your daily routine. And do you practice a daily routine?
Yes, I do. My morning routine, I keep it relatively simple. I don't like to overcomplicate things. I tend to be tired when I wake up. So it starts with scraping my tongue with a metal tongue scraper. And what that does, A, it cleans your tongue, but B, besides like oral health, it can indicate kind of what is going on, how you're digesting your food. Like, not to get too graphic, but I'm gonna. Typically, you're gonna see like some white sludge on your tongue in the morning, and that's absolutely normal. But you'll notice the levels will kind of change daily if it's something you do daily, and it's based on like what you've been eating. So you can kind of notice if your diet's been heavier or denser, or you're not making the most healthiest food choices, there's probably going to be some excess, what we call ama or waste on your tongue. So it's an indicator. It also, they say Ayurvedically that it kind of starts your digestive tract, like going for the day. It's like you've scraped over your taste buds, and now like you're getting your body prepped to start your day by eating. So next, I feed the dogs. That's not really Ayurvedic, but it's my daily.
But it is important.
It's important. They come next. They patiently wait for the tongue scraping and the teeth brushing, and then warm water. So warm water is another great practice. I know some people cringe whenever I kind of suggest this. They're like, no, coffee first. But the water, it's hydrating, and you can add lemon if you can't handle the thought of just plain hot water. And it is essential that you cook it. When you cook the water, it changes its makeup, so it's easier for your body to digest. It makes a difference than just running the hot water under the tap.
That's fascinating. So do you actually like bring it to a boil or just warm it?
I just warm it. I don't necessarily bring it all the way up to a boil. I just heat the kettle and get it like tea warm. If it does happen to get too hot, I tend to just add a little bit of like cold water to the top of it so that I can drink it.
Drinkable.
Yeah. So warm water, and then I meditate. I meditate for about 20 minutes in the morning just to clear out my mind. Oil pulling is another thing. I'm on and off with it. So if I am oil pulling, that is something that I would do in the morning with like brushing my teeth and that stuff. So now I'm talking about it, I probably should bring it back in. But yeah,
I love oil pulling.
Yeah, I know you're a big advocate. I go through phases with it. So
I really like it. I feel like, and every time I go to the dentist, they're always impressed with my oral hygiene, and I don't think I'm a superior toothbrusher by any stretch of the imagination. So I'm always like fascinated, and I usually tell them, well, it's due to oil pulling, and then they look at me, a little sideways, and depending on my mood, I may go into explaining it, or I may just kind of let it go. But the idea of a dinacharya in your morning routine is that you cleanse the senses to kind of get the day started. So the tongue scraping is awesome, and your body, like Allison said, you release those toxins through your tongue when you sleep, which is a little icky to think about, but kind of cool that we can have this tool to remove it in the morning and start the day off without all that in our mouths. And the oil pulling, so folks don't know what that is. Allison, do you want to explain what the act of oil pulling is?
Yeah, so there's different oils. Like typically it's either a sesame oil or like there are some Ayurveda products out there. One is called Daily Swish by Banyan Botanical. So you take about a tablespoon of oil. I did like a capful and pour it in, and then you're swishing it really around in your mouth for 10 to 15 minutes. You start where you can, like maybe do 5. maybe do 2 to start, because it is, it's not necessarily tasty.
No,
it's not. But you do, after, when you're doing it, there is this like really clean feeling in your mouth afterwards. And it's meant to bring more health to your gums, strengthen your gums. Oil is really nourishing, so it even will strengthen like around your teeth and things like that. So
it
that
helps to draw out any, like, if you have any stuff hanging around in your gums or anything going on, it helps to kind of draw that out. So your mouth definitely does feel super clean after doing it. One of the other pieces that I do for eyes is spray the rose water. Do you do that? Yeah. Oh, well, our listeners can't see that, but Allison's holding up.
Yeah, I'm holding up some rose water. Cool water in your eyes is another. So when you think about your senses, like splashing some cool water on your eyes, and then also, or the rose water, you can use that too. That's really cooling. This is great. And we can probably get into this more after, but like summertime, I just keep one in my car because it helps. I get so hot and aggravated when I'm driving. I like to spray it.
So you'll just spray the rose water like on you as like a mist, like a body mist? Oh, that's awesome. It does feel really nice.
And you can spray it in your face. And especially if you're someone who is staring at the computer all the time, like I definitely would recommend, because it is okay. Like it's like, I wouldn't like put it up to your eye and spray it, but like it's not going to irritate your eyes. So you can spray it like near your eyes and kind of get this fresh.
I do spray it right in my eye. It doesn't irritate. Of course, I would recommend, if any listeners want to try that of course you try it on a less sensitive part of your body first before just spraying it right in your eyeball. But it definitely takes a little getting used to doing that, but you feel it does have a cooling quality and feel very refreshing. So that's awesome. And I have written some more blog posts and information, so we can definitely share some resources with the listeners for who may want to dive a little deeper into Ayurveda. But I know we could talk all day just about that. So we'll move on a little bit. So I'm interested in knowing what you would tell someone who has never done yoga or has never meditated before. Like, how would you get them started?
So really, it's both are practices that I think you need to experience. Like getting them to start, it's like you have to try it to understand it. Like the aftermath is like, that's the big selling point, I would say. Like that feeling that you have after you've done a yoga class and you just have like moved your body, you've slowed yourself down, you might have sweat a little, but after Shavasana, where you've just kind of like let yourself settle in, there's just this ease and calm that I haven't found another like natural way to get to. So that I would say really, and meditation too, you start small and try and do a minute, try and do 2 minutes. There's a lot of apps out there that you can give it a whirl. And I think people get hesitant or nervous about it because they think they're not going to be able to do it. Like so many people are like, I'm not flexible, I can't do yoga. And it's like, that's the point. Like, there are some people that are inherently very flexible. Like I was not one of them. And I really, after, practicing, noticed like, there was an increase in how I was able to move and just how things felt in my body. Just feeling like less tension, more ease.
Yeah, it's awesome. I mean, I've practiced yoga on and off for, I don't know, a while now. Not quite as long as you. I do remember when you started doing yoga, it was not as trendy as it is now. And I remember thinking you were slightly crazy. And then now here we are several years later. I still think you're crazy, but it's for totally different reasons. Just kidding. That we... and you do feel better when you do these things. It's the same thing about really any self-care practices. And this is why I kind of got into this at this level, because I know what it feels like when you're not taking care of yourself. And we tend to do that, right? It's the first thing that goes out the window when we have a competing priority. It's like, oh, well, no, I guess we're not going to yoga today, or I'm going to skip my this or that, and all these things that really... We need to shift that, and it has to be you first, your needs first, then you help everybody else. I know it's a cliche, but what do they tell you when you get on an airplane? You put your oxygen mask on first, then you help everybody else. Right. And it's just, it's very different thinking for us though, because that's not what we're programmed really to do. That's not what we're taught to do or celebrated for doing. So it feels almost a little like an act of resistance when we put our needs first.
Right. And I mean, that is another layer as to I think why I was so like intrigued. I'm like, this is another way of of looking at how we exist and live and take care of ourselves. It's not it's the opposite, and it makes sense, and like making sure that you're in the best like headspace and physical space for you to show up to your life makes all the difference. And then it affects everyone around you. You know, if I'm pissed off because I missed my yoga class, like I'm going to take that out on whoever's closest to me, you know? So it matters. And I think like trying to get people on, I mean, and it has come a long way. Like more people are definitely kind of seeing this way of being as beneficial. But yeah,
100%.
myself too, I realized we were just away for a few days and like my meditation practice went out the window. And normally I'll try, but I think I was just so excited about like, I'm not home, you know, I didn't, but then like yesterday I was feeling super anxious and I was like, like I haven't meditated like I normally do in like 4 days. So you do notice the effects once you get off of your regimens, your routines.
Yeah. Fascinating. So I've heard people say that they're hesitant to begin practicing yoga, or that their attempts to get started have not been inclusive or friendly for beginners. So what do you recommend for people who feel this way, and or what do you do in your classes to prevent that from happening?
Okay, big question. I recommend a lot of studios do offer a beginner series. So I think starting in that type of environment where you're surrounded by all beginners, and normally they're like 4 to 6 weeks long, and you can keep doing that series. Like I would recommend finding a class specific to beginners. You can start in any class. Like when I started, I didn't start in a beginner's class. I just went in and I had absolutely no clue what was going on. And it, you know, I came to learn that I was doing things completely wrong repetitively because I didn't know what I was doing. So I think starting in a beginner's class is good. But a lot of teachers also, myself included, we try and teach to the beginner. So if you have a class full of people, when the studios are now opening again, and there will be like in studio or outdoor classes, and you can navigate and tell who's a beginner in there, you teach to that person. Like you make sure that they are feeling stable and feeling secure, and maybe give them a little extra attention throughout the class so that you know that they feel safe and that they're taken care of. I also recommend just letting your teacher know too. If you show up and it's your first time, like people tend to do that, but it is helpful just to know if there's someone that's never done it, because if it's a class of people that are coming all the time, you know, you don't have to be so specific about what you're saying because you know that the students know. So if I try and just give the newbies like a little extra attention. The other thing is do some privates. To find a teacher. Like I teach one-on-one yoga also for this reason, so that you can get a steady foundation of the practice before joining the group class. And with privates too, you can understand how the poses land on your own body, as far as how down dog's going to feel, and finding your own ways to get into the poses that feel best for you, and then you can adapt them into a group class. But absolutely. I say just go for it if you're curious. Now it's, you know, there's yoga everywhere, so I feel like you also could watch a few videos online to get a sense, but I definitely would recommend finding an actual yoga teacher and going to a class, or doing a private.
Yeah, and I think people need to, you know, we have to let go of that idea of perfection, and that like,
oh, for sure,
that whole just like, oh, you know, those false barriers that we put up for ourselves, that like, I'm too old, I'm not flexible, I'm too this, I'm too that, my body's too big, whatever, like all these things we get in our head, and then we're not even willing to try. And I know I always talk about this in my sessions when I'm presenting, but I'm going to share it here as well because we're interviewing my cousin on this podcast. But back about a year or so ago now, at this point, we started doing virtual yoga lessons with Allison as our instructor and my mom and I as the students, keeping it a family event here. And my mom's never done yoga before, and she won't be embarrassed that I tell the story, but at first she was really hesitant. She's not necessarily someone who would put herself out there and go into a class and risk making a fool of herself, or God forbid, get down on the ground in a pose and not be able to get back up, or she just wouldn't feel comfortable doing that. So by hiring Allison to teach these weekly sessions with us, she's really gotten to be more comfortable. And you've been wonderful with giving modifications with chair poses, lots of standing poses. We do get down on the floor sometimes, although you can also modify that and use a bed if that's more comfortable, or stay in the chair. We use props, and it's a very obviously safe environment for us, but it has allowed my mom to get a little more comfortable in her body, and she's always saying how great it has made her feel. And the good thing is, if she does get herself on the ground now, she can get herself back up, and she feels more confident about that. So that's really awesome, and I do obviously credit that to taking the steps to have that one-on-one sessions with someone trained to do that. And that has been very beneficial, and certainly a highlight of the last year or so with COVID, which there aren't a lot of highlights, so we have to look for the bright spots. But that's excellent. And when we think about meditation too, I always tell folks to think of it like a muscle. You have to build it. And same thing, like you got to build these practices. You can't just expect to run a marathon tomorrow if you haven't been training for it. Same thing with yoga. You're going to need to build up that flexibility, and you're going to need to build up those meditation practices. I'm wondering, you did mention some apps for smartphones that you use. What are your favorite apps for meditation?
For meditation, I use Insight Timer, which is free. And then I also have the 10% Happier app, which I like. That's like Dan Harris. I don't know if you're familiar with him.
I've heard of it. I've not listened to it, but folks
That
have
one
recommended that to me.
That one's a subscription. It's not wildly expensive. I feel like it might be $10 or $12 a month, but don't quote me on that. But he has a lot of they're all on, some of them are on Insight Timer too. Like you'll find the same teachers kind of going around, like the big names like Jack Kornfield and Joseph Goldstein and anyway, a whole slew of meditation teachers on there. And they have different, you can have a 5-minute, you can have a 10-minute, you can have a 15-minute, and then they have longer ones. So that's what I really like, because it does make a difference. To your point about the muscle, like even taking a minute or two, like it makes a difference to just stop, like take a breath, close your eyes, feel your body, and then continue what you're doing. So you become less reactive, you become more patient, and then you work your way up to more minutes. And there is that sweet spot. Like I've discovered that, yeah, you can get a lot out of 5 to 10 minutes. But once you start diving into the deep end and doing 20, 30, 45-minute meditations, you can get into like a zone, which is pretty cool. And I find that that's like, once you tip over that 15-minute mark and you make it to like 20, 25, 30 minutes, it feels like more of an experience than just kind of but that's my experience. And I'm still working towards a regular 30-minute a day practice.
Still a work in progress, always.
It always will be. Meditation was one of the hardest things for me to make happen. But now I can proudly say I do it pretty much daily unless I'm on vacation.
Excellent. So I know, unfortunately, some people have negative things to say about yoga, meditation, and Ayurveda even. They may not understand the benefits of these practices. So I'm wondering if you can share some of the positive impacts you or your students have felt after they've worked with you and really had this experience.
So some of the positive impacts, the main one I would say would be a greater sense of awareness, being aware of yourself, being aware of your body, being able to comfortably slow yourself down is huge. And I think a lot of people don't value the benefit of slowing down, especially in this realm of life. It's like go, 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 like what's next, keep achieving, keep doing, and not taking those moments to reflect and notice and enjoy it. So taking in how you feel. So Ayurvedically, like when working with people, I think there's some aha moments when you start to look at your daily routine and things that are working and things that aren't working, and adjusting and creating the optimum routine for your constitution has made a big impact for people. Just shifting small little shifts, like little times, like adding the tongue scraping, adding the water in the morning, eating in a way that's slow and thoughtful. It all makes a difference mentally and physically. More mental benefits from like yoga practices and meditation is cultivating more self-compassion. To your point before, where you were saying people don't want to, I'm too old, I have no idea what I'm doing, like this, that, the other. It can help you get through some of those hurdles because you show up and you do it, and then you recognize like it's yoga philosophy is, it's a practice. Like we are constantly practicing. There is no pot of gold at the end of this rainbow. It's like an ongoing process, which can be daunting, but it's, it's slow, steady adjustments and improvements and feeling better in your body. So more self-compassion, more patience with people, like less, like you're kind of smoothing out your edges, I would say, but not in a way that makes you lame or like have no edge, like you're just meh. Like it's softer, and it's a better way. It helps your relationships. And I would say physically, less tension. Yoga is going to help you open up. It's going to help you build strength. So you have more body awareness. Like you'll notice too, like just in your day to day. I remember one thing driving, like I tend to just, I'll notice if I'm gripping the steering wheel. And that's just from my yoga practices. I think of instructor being like, don't grip. I'm like, ooh, like, or like slumping. Like I'm like, oh, I could be sitting up straighter. So these little tweaks that just start to weave their way in. And
I love that. Little tweaks. I think that's going to be the episode title. No, because it's really important. And I think sometimes we think, and I talk about this in my trainings too, we think about like the end goal. Like we forget the journey, and we forget that it's okay to start small and be a beginner. And we want to like go from 0 to a million. We don't recognize that small shifts and little things, little tweaks and habits that we can build along the way will actually have a great impact. So even if you can only do meditation for 5 minutes a day, stay there. That's fine. If that's all you can do, that's fine. You will still feel benefits, even from just a couple of standing yoga poses. I mean, I've experienced it myself. Like, you will feel better. It doesn't have to be this epic 90-minute thing that you have to do every single day. And it's just, we get so crazy in our head with what things have to be that we're not even willing to try sometimes.
Right. And that's huge. Like, that's been another like barrier, I think. And I've been guilty of this too, but like the pandemic really opened up to, like 30 minutes can be in, like just move, like just get 30 minutes of movement in, or you don't need to do like you said, you don't need to do the hour. You start the practice. So then it becomes a habit, like whatever it is you're trying to do. If you're trying to cook more, just pick one meal, like either a week or a couple days a week that you're going to make dinner. Or with your breakfast, maybe it's you always have a cooked breakfast every day, and then you just add once there feels to be space, because like what happens is you add everything on and then it just all falls apart. So yeah, steady and slow and steady. That was in my Ayurveda training. We had one of the instructors, and she always was just slowly. That's like everything is slow. And I know that's not the most appealing to people, but it's what works.
Well, it's not how our culture functions either.
No.
We push more, fast, quicker. Like, it's crazy. We romanticize being busy and burning the candle at both ends. We wear being a workaholic as your badge of honor. Like, that's not a really good way to be when we're thinking about health and wellness and longevity and how we're going to live long, happy, successful, productive lives. That's not the way to get there. Excellent. All right, I have one more question for you. So aside from yoga, as we know you do yoga and meditation and practice Ayurveda, what other self-care practices do you incorporate into your daily life?
Okay, so besides my morning routines and I practice, all that, I do other exercises. Like I like to walk. I have a dog. He brings a lot of like joy and happiness into my world. And I live near the beach, which also is important to me. So I go to the beach often. I take him down there. My husband has a dog too, so we have two. So spending time with them, spending time, like quality time, with people is important to me as well. Health-wise too, there's seasonal routines that I like to bring into play. So as the seasons start to change, just shifting things up a little bit.
Can you give an example?
Yeah, I can get, so in like now we're entering into like summer. So things are starting to get warmer. So where that heat element is pretty active in our outside world, it's reducing that within my internal environment. So cooling off, now it's time to like have more cool beverages, more watermelon, more berries, more refreshing type of foods. And with exercise tending to tone it down. Like I still will exercise, but like I'm not going to go to a hot yoga class in the middle of summer. Maybe I'm going to go to like an outdoor class or an unheated class. And, same with any super rigorous exercise. I'd be strategic about where I was going to place that in my day, not at high noon. Maybe it's going to be at dusk when things have cooled off a little bit.
Fascinating. I feel like that could be a whole nother episode. We could talk more
about I know.
the seasons and like what you do. And I know certain foods play into that too. And this is a very Ayurvedic perspective, but like salads, for example, are more cooling than a bowl of soup. So you're probably not going to eat a bowl of soup in 100-degree weather because that's not going to be the best thing for your body. It's not going to be cooling. It's going to have a heating effect, right?
Yep. Yeah. So soup, like more warm foods in the cold months and more cool foods in the warm months, and thinking about that. Like, and it's a nice way to change things up too. So it's like once you find the things that you like to do, but then you kind of can tweak them to the season, just like your wardrobe, change your eating, change your daily routines.
Oh, I love that. I never thought about kind of relating it to or thinking about it from the perspective of, of course we change our wardrobe. We can't wear the same clothes, not in Massachusetts anyway. You cannot wear the same clothes you're wearing in December in August. Like that's just not going to work. Right. Awesome. So thank you, Allison, so much. I'm wondering if you wouldn't mind telling us where folks can find you if they're interested in following you and learning more and perhaps looking into the services that you provide.
Yes. You can find me on social media on Instagram. My handle is at Allison, ALLISON _Derrico, DERRICO. I also have two websites. So backbayayurveda.com. And you also could find me at bostonmassageassociates.com. I work out of that space in Back Bay. And that's it.
Awesome. So and if folks have a real hard time finding you, they can always reach out to me. I know where to find you.
Yes.
And did you want to give your email address?
Oh, sure. Allison.Derrico19@gmail.com.
Excellent. And we'll make sure that that's in the resources for the episode as well. So thank you so much for joining us today, Allison. I enjoyed chatting with you and we hope to see you at the cabaret again soon.
Yes, thank you. This was fun.
That was so much fun to chat with my cousin, Allison Derrico, today. If Ayurveda is of interest, I suggest exploring it more. I find it fascinating. I will make sure my blog post on Ayurveda is linked in the episode notes for the ease of my listeners. But look into it more and see if it resonates with you. To me, it makes a lot of sense. We barely scratched the surface in this interview of Ayurveda, but as always, you can start small. Maybe the idea of tongue scraping or oil pulling is appealing, or perhaps you're just curious to find out your dosha and how to feed your body from that perspective. Allison also really highlighted the importance of slowing down and taking time for ourselves. It is critical. I know that the times I neglect my needs are not when I am at my best. When I put my needs first and make myself a priority, I feel so much better. I'm more productive, and I'm just a better person to be around, truthfully. And small, tiny habits are so important, little tweaks. Over time, I promise these small changes will have a big impact. You can't do all the things every day. And some days, 5 minutes is all you got, and that's okay. Move your body, journal, meditate, whatever you wish for those 5 minutes. You'll notice a difference. Inviting more mindfulness is a great way to get more grounded, too. Allison mentioned allowing yourself to feel that intentional pause. I like to promote the STOP method. S, stop what you're doing. T, take a breath. In through your nose and out through your mouth. O, observe your inner and outer worlds. Then P, proceed. So we can give ourselves that momentary pause, that intentional breath of mindfulness. And if you want to try yoga, please give it a whirl. Be sure to research an appropriate class or reach out and ask for recommendations. And don't be afraid to explore modifications for poses or use props as necessary. I used to feel ashamed using props as if it was some sort of cop-out. That was, of course, during the time I was deep in my dis-ease with exercise bulimia. Now I celebrate my body for all that it can do for me. Movement is a gift. And there is nothing wrong with modifying poses, using props, doing chair poses, standing poses, whatever you need for your body. Thanks for listening to this episode. Remember to subscribe and rate this podcast on your preferred player. The ratings help us grow and share the message of self-care. If you have comments, suggestions, or questions, please reach out directly by emailing podcast@drmcselfcare.com. That's drmcselfcare.com. And come join the cast party at Dr. MC's Self-Care Cabaret on Facebook and Instagram at Dr. MC Self-Care or on my website, drmcselfcare.com. Be sure to like, subscribe, and love me across all my social media platforms for the most up-to-date information on self-care. See you next time. Stay well and do good.